Hey there and welcome back. As we wrap up our tour of the 7 wonders of the New World, we've traveled all across the Americas, from Chichen Itza and its amazing pyramid, then to the Pacific for Rapa Nui to look at the Moai. From there we traveled to Mesa Verde and looked at the amazing cliff dwellings, then to Peru to hike up to Machu Picchu, then to the very humid Louisiana to look at the LSU Mounds. From there we went to San Lorenzo and more or less just talked about the Olmec heads that were found there. And this week we're traveling not too far from there to just outside of Mexico City. Mexico is home to many different civilizations, and most of us know the big ones, the Olmec, the Maya, and the Aztecs. But there was one civilization that only lasted for about 200 years. That civilization was the Toltec, and much like the other Mesoamerican civilizations, they built on top of what the Olmec had already created. Today we're going to look at their capital city of Tula, otherwise known as Tollan. And like with the Olmec, we have the Aztecs to thank for some of the information we actually know about the Toltec. But unlike where the Aztecs only gave the Olmec a name, the Aztecs had a lot of fanciful stories about the Toltec, and we can only take what they said with a grain of salt. But one thing is for certain, the Aztecs held the Toltec in very high regards, even claiming to be their direct descendants. But through careful studying, we can actually glean some truths out of what the Aztecs said about the Toltec. After colonization, the Spaniards actually wrote down a lot of what the Aztecs had to say about the Toltec, and between that and the archaeological record, we can actually tell some truths about who they actually were. So what do we actually know about the Toltec? We know that they came from the northwest deserts and moved to the Valley of Mexico. The Aztecs claim that the first ruler of the Toltec was Sepetat Mixcoatl, but we know that Mixcoatl was actually a god. He was associated with hunting and the Milky Way. The Aztec claimed that the Toltec actually burned down the city of Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan was a large city that we don't really know much about. We don't know who created it, and we don't know how it was actually destroyed. At its height, it's thought to have had around 200,000 people living there, but this is all a topic for another time. We know that the first actual ruler of the Toltec was Seacatl Topelson. In his youth, he studied to become a priest, and eventually achieved this by becoming the high priest of Quetzalcoatl. And he's the one that we actually credit with founding the city of Tollan. But where were they located before they moved their capital to Tollan? The first settlement we actually know of from the Toltec was Calauhucan, and then sometime around 950 CE, Topelson moved the capital to Tollan. Before we talk about how the Toltec civilization ended, let's actually look at the city of Tollan. Tollan was already a settlement before the Toltec took it over, but once they took it over around 900 CE, it started to thrive. This is again where we see the Aztecs over-exaggerate about the Toltec. They said that the city of Tollan, the buildings were made out of solid gold, decorated with jade and turquoise. There's no evidence of solid gold buildings at the site, but we do know that Tollan was famed for the craftspeople that it brought in. The site of Tollan actually served multiple purposes for the Toltec. There was 2 pyramids constructed, a palace, a colonnaded walkway, 2 ball courts, and this was all surrounded by domestic housing. And we're going to break these down, starting with the housing. The housing at Tollan covers about 8 square kilometers, and it had to be this large, because it's thought that the population at Tollan actually reached the tens of thousands. There isn't really much to talk about with the houses, so let's move on to the palace. The palace is made up of 3 rooms, each containing a bench, friezes, and a pool. But room 2 seems like where all the meetings actually took place. The benches in room 2 are decorated with friezes, showing warriors carrying shields and weapons, following who is believed to be Toltec, the rain god that was worshipped by the Aztecs. And with how much the Aztecs actually borrowed from the Toltec, it's possible that Toltec was actually their rain god as well. But when you visit the site of Tollan, it's not the domestic housing or the palace that really draws your eye. It's the 2 pyramids. They may not be the largest pyramids in Mesoamerica, but what they lack in size, they make up for in decoration. The main pyramid is made up of 5 terraces. On the south side of the pyramid are stairs that lead to 2 rooms at the top of the pyramid, and this is where you see the most iconic part of the pyramid. There are 4 large warrior statues, all standing about 4.6 meters in height, and would have originally supported the temple's roof at the top of the pyramid. Each of them is dressed for battle and carrying atlatls, which were spear throwers. They were done in what's called the Tula style, and each one's almost identical to the one before it, which suggests that they had a well-defined workshop where they were able to turn these things out in other statues in mass production. So if the Toltec were able to construct an amazing civilization and a city that could have held possibly tens of thousands of people, why did they collapse? Like many of the other civilizations in Mesoamerica, we don't actually know why they collapsed. We do know that, like the Aztec that followed them, they put a large amount of stock into warfare. It's possible that with their need to conquer those around them, and then taking those people that they conquered and forcing them into their culture, whether those people wanted it or not, could have led to civil unrest. It's also very possible with their constant expansion that they weren't able to support their population when something like a drought occurred, meaning that they didn't have enough food to go around, which could have caused the civilization's collapse. The site of Tollan didn't have a nice end. Sometime during the mid-12th century CE, it was destroyed destroyed, being burnt, and purposefully buried. Even though the Toltecs were around for such a short amount of time, they produced quite a bit and left us with quite a bit to study. They left an impression on those that followed them as well, as we see with the Aztecs, who seem to have based much of their culture and civilization off of what the Toltec were. And with that, we've wrapped up our tour of the 7 wonders of the New World. I want to thank you all for watching, and I want to thank the patrons for their help. And if you want to know where we're going next, then consider heading over to Patreon and signing up. For as little as $2 a month, you can get extra content and help us choose where we're going to go next.